Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Zach Kathnelson. I'm the Director of Growth with Klipfolio, and I'm really excited to chat with you today. We've got some great, quick content to cover on building awesome sales dashboards, revenue dashboards, basically dashboards built off of any data that exists in Salesforce. We are major Salesforce users here at Klipfolio. We know it and love it. I'm in there every day. And I know the power of Salesforce, the reporting engine in particular. I can access any information always at my fingertips. But there are a lot of really common pain points that I feel around Salesforce data and that I know our customers feel around Salesforce data. And I wanted to talk to you today around about how we and so many Klipfolio customers out there are extending the power of Salesforce by bringing the data to life in more flexible, more meaningful ways and getting it out to key teams. So let me start by tackling one quick thing. Obviously, Klipfolio is a dashboard and reporting and analytics platform, but Salesforce has dashboards in their platform as well. So why do I need both? Well, there's a few main reasons. I think one of the biggest values that Klipfolio can bring to the table is what we often call internally freeing the data. Our customers and businesses all over the world use so many different tools to run their business. And Salesforce is a big one. And for us, Salesforce is an information hub. We have information in Salesforce flowing in from so many other key systems in the business, Zuora for our billing and subscription management, Marketo for our marketing automation, and many others, Zendesk for our help desk and ticketing. Salesforce is often the one source of truth in the business, bringing all this key information together and helping us look at it side by side. And that's incredible for a user like myself who can access whatever I want in Salesforce. But there are so many members of our team who play such an integral role in how we deliver a polished solution to our customer base that are never in Salesforce. They never think about revenue. They often don't talk to customers. Klipfolio allows us to take that rich data that lives in Salesforce and serve it up to other teams in the business who are not Salesforce users. And I'll get into pricing and licensing a little bit later, but directly related to the value we're bringing around freeing the data is that Klipfolio allows you to have an unlimited number of users in the platform, consuming content and creating content at a very low price point. So that's point number one. In no particular order, not necessarily the largest of the value props, but one of them for sure, freeing the data, getting it out to other key team members and key stakeholders in the business. Point number two is Klipfolio wins on huge power and huge flexibility at a very aggressive price point. So yes, Salesforce has dashboards and they're often very quick to build. Klipfolio lets you take that raw data and bring it to life literally however you have drawn it up on the back of a napkin over a passionate lunch, or however that data or that report exists in your mind. We can help you achieve it. I find myself often saying to new Klipfolio users, if you have access to the data that you want to work with, there are almost no limits to how you can showcase it in our platform. And for me personally, one of the reasons I love building sales dashboards so much, and I've built a ton over the years, I'll show you a few of them. One of the reasons I love working with Salesforce data so much is that it helps users overcome one of the biggest hurdles that new users in our platform can face, which is accessing data. Salesforce makes it so easy to access the data that I need and that users need. And once that hurdle is overcome, we can help you bring that data to life and show it in a much more meaningful way. So power and flexibility of the dashboards in Klipfolio is another huge value prop of how we can help extend the value of Salesforce data in the organization. So let's get right into it. If you're a new trial user in Klipfolio, I've just spent a little while talking about data. Let's start right there. That's the first thing you should think of. Where does the key data live that you want to work with and that you want to bring to life for your team members. There's two ways to get Salesforce data into Klipfolio. So let's go over to the data sources section. This is a trial account that I've been working in. So I've got a number of data sources that are already created in here, but we're going to start from scratch and we're going to create a new one. And if you're just joining us today, thanks a lot for hopping in. You're not too late. We delayed a little bit getting started. Chime in with any questions or comments at all, any step of the way, and I'm happy to try and make the conversation a little bit more relevant for you if there was something specific you were hoping to cover. But we want to start the Klipfolio conversation. You want to start your trial experience with getting the right data into the platform to play with. So I've navigated to the data sources section, and I wanted to create a new data source. There's that orange button on the last page. What we see here in the middle are some of the larger services that our customers are leveraging. I'm going to search for Salesforce. And there's two main options that you can take to get Salesforce data into Klipfolio. What you're seeing along the left here is going to bring you to pre-built queries that are going to request a certain set of information from Salesforce. I rarely take those approaches. I think it's better, as in more flexible, and almost just as easy to create a custom data source. So let's choose this option over on the right. I have already authenticated to Salesforce, but I would just have to sign in. One of the prerequisites of working with Salesforce data in Klipfolio is that you do have Salesforce Enterprise Edition or higher, or a Salesforce Edition that provides API access. So that's one quick gotcha to look for. And one of the quick ways you can determine that is, well, I thought that was one of the ways. Let's see. I was trying to hover over Salesforce in the browser. I'll show you a little bit later. If you have a browser tab open with Salesforce in it, there is a quick way. Maybe I'll try and replicate it in another screen. There we go. So here I've got Salesforce open in another browser tab. If you just hover over that tab, it'll tell you what edition you're working with. So, sorry for the little digression. We are going to go to the next step. After we've authenticated with our username and password. And here we're going to see two main options. One, and the rule we'll show first, is that in Klipfolio, we have the ability to work with a number of the different Salesforce reports that you have created already. We can work with any summary reports or any tabular reports, and we call them detailed in Klipfolio. So what I'm seeing in this list is a list of the reports that I have created most recently in Salesforce. And if there's a report that you know of and that you really want to work with, but you don't see it in this list, the route you'd want to take is to hop into Salesforce, go to the report section, simply run that report that you might have created a little while ago, and start this process over in Klipfolio of searching for the Salesforce reports, and you should see that new report again at the top of the list. We are not able to work with matrix reports, and we're not able to work with joined reports. However, I've always found that with only a little bit of work in Salesforce, you can take a metrics report, reformat it slightly as a summary report, and still have access to the same type of data. So the report I want to work with today, I believe, is a detailed report. So I choose detailed or summary from the dropdown, and I choose the report I want to work with. And here we get a preview of the data. Really simple data set that I wanted to work with that we're happy to show publicly. So I have our account owners, the territory that these leads are from, when we did a demo call with these prospects, which is a type of engagement that we log in a certain way in Salesforce, very relevant to me. The number of clips that this prospect had created in the trial, and then we've got some lead scoring, so I've got that data in here as well. Just some data that we're happy to show publicly, and good for demo purposes. So I'm going to go to the next step. So if this data looks good, we can essentially move on. And again, if any questions or concerns are coming to mind, please let me know anytime and I'll pause or address anything specific. But we're talking about how to get some of that rich Salesforce data into Klipfolio so we can then bring it to life. You can have a lot of data sources over time in Klipfolio. So it's really important to give it a good, clear name that is going to allow you to find this data source later on. The default description I find is really helpful because I can call this data source whatever I want. So I'm going to call this leads by territory and number of clips, which is what it is. And in the moment, I know exactly what data source I'm talking to when I look at this title. But if we, picture ourselves 3 weeks from now, this name might not be quite that clear. So the default description I find is really helpful. It tells you the name of the report exactly as it exists in Salesforce and the actual report ID. And if I bring our Salesforce tab up one more time, I may have closed it by accident. If I run this report in Salesforce, this ID appears in the URL. So we're just helping you find where that original data set exists. The queue for refresh option is a really important one as well. This is basically dictating how often Klipfolio is going to reach back out to Salesforce and pull in the newest version of the data. This is a factor in our pricing, and it really depends on the use case that you're trying to execute. Is this a wallboard on your sales floor that's meant to foster some friendly competition? And are you closing deals literally every minute? Do we want this data source to refresh every minute? If so, that's an option. It's available in some of the higher, slightly higher pricing plans, starting at around $200 a month. Or is this for reporting purposes? Maybe we're getting it out to a few team members. We have a lot of dashboards like this that are sort of sending in daily summaries or weekly summaries, in which case every 24 hours is more than enough. You can choose whichever option makes the most sense. And one of the nice things about working in a trial of Klipfolio is that it's basically an unlimited trial. So you can really explore, experiment as much as you want, and you have access to a completely full feature set. For the purposes of today, I'm actually going to set this to just every 24 hours. We'll see if we even need to refresh it. But I'm going to save this. And I have just created a data source that I can now work with in Klipfolio and bring this data to life. Let's look at option 2 to bring data in. And I'm going to, let's see if we can do this quickly. I'm going to open Salesforce up and show you one thing. Oh, here's our tab. So let's look at that exact report that we just ran. When I hide details on this report, I see that this contains 1,500 records. Let's say hypothetically, if I expand the date range and say the previous 2 calendar years, we're now up to 2,700 records. And I see this little note towards the top of the screen. 2,000 of 2,700 records are displayed below. Well, if I save this report as is, I'm going to save it. And then let's go back into Klipfolio. Let's try and find that report. Here we go. Leads by territory and number of clips. So I'm just going to queue this one for refresh. And let's see if our last refresh time updates. Perfect. So remember, I extended the date range on the report in Salesforce. If I look again at what this data source looks like, I see 200 rows and I see that 1,800 rows are below. So that gives us a total of 2,000. Well, remember, back in Salesforce, I saw this note that even though the report has 2,700 records in total, only 2,000 are being shown. So I'm trying to show you a limitation of how the APIs work together. When you work with a Salesforce report, you can only get up to 2,000 rows of data. Now that is sometimes not a problem. With this particular data set, I should think about what level of granularity I really need. For instance, am I only interested in how many total demo calls each team member did? In which case, I could very easily show the report like this. Instead of a tabular report, create a summary report. And here I have a very nice clean breakdown of the volumes that each team member is doing, volume of calls. I can also add some of this other numerical data. So in a summary report, I can summarize the number of clips, and I can also summarize how this lead score rolls up. And when I then run the report, I have a lot more rich data to look at. And in Klipfolio, this is exactly the data I would see. Let me actually save this. And we'll go back into Klipfolio, refresh this data source once more. Actually, I'm going to need to reconfigure it because I have changed it from a tabular report to a summary report. So let's choose summary this time. So this is exactly the information that I see, just the total summary over time. And I can further group this by maybe calendar month or year to add more granularity to this report and still be able to work with it. The only thing I lose is the actual finite detail of seeing how many clips each prospect built and the actual lead score of each prospect. So I need to think about my use case ultimately. And if my use case requires that granular level of detail, if for instance, I really needed to see individuals' email addresses and the exact postal code that each prospect came from, then I wouldn't be able to get away with really any level of summarizing. And if that data set that I wanted to work with was going to be more than 2,000 rows, here's the approach that I would need to take. Instead of working, I'm just going to save this so we end up with a data source that we can experiment with in a little bit. If, however, I decided that I did need that granular detail and that data set was going to be large, let's look at another way of getting data into Klipfolio. So we're going to take a similar approach. We're going to create a custom Salesforce data source, and we're going to authenticate or use the token that we've created already. So this time, let's stick with the SOQL approach, Salesforce Object Query Language. So right in Klipfolio, we've got a little wizard that allows you to write a SOQL query. So the first step is to choose the object we want to get data from, the Salesforce object. So I'm going to choose the lead object. And then I have the ability to simply select the fields that I'm most interested in. So I wanted to get the first name of our account managers, the lead score, the number of clips, the date that they did a demo call. I think that was all I had. And I want to add a couple filters. Let's say the demo call is equal to, let's say, the last 365 days. Maybe let's, yeah, okay, so we can do a good showcase here. So right now I'll say the last 365 days. I don't think that will give us too big of a data set. Here we can see a preview of what the data looks like. Sometimes if your queries are a little bit more complex, it does take a few minutes to execute, or if the data set is a little larger, it takes a couple minutes. So right in this wizard, and I've stayed in simple mode for this option, we were able to write a query pretty quickly. If, and this in this case I do, if I needed to modify that query, I can hop into advanced mode, and here I see the actual SOQL query. And I wanted to make a simple change. Let's just say I wanted to go back 2 full years or 730 days. Here I can do that very easily. So here's our larger data set. So we've got 2,500 rows total. This would be too large to work with through a report. So it's a good example of when an SOQL query is the better approach. Perfect. So we've got a good data source here as well that we want to work with. I'm going to go through the step of modeling this data. I'll show you the advantage to that really quickly. This is, in some places in Klipfolio, this is an optional step, but it's a good step to take either way. We don't need to take very many actions in it, but I'll explain to you what it does. So modeling data is a step by which you can give Klipfolio a little bit more awareness as to what your data is. So in the previous screen, we saw a preview of the raw data, just as we were pulling it in from Salesforce. But that data in Klipfolio is kept in that totally raw format. So we don't even really have the awareness that this column is a date, as you can see here, and that this column is a number, and so on. Klipfolio does a good job of inferring and trying to guess that information. In this case, it looks like we got it right. This is text, numerical, date, numerical. If, for example, I wanted to change any options here, so we got the date format right, but let's just say, I didn't want to display it in that format that you saw on the previous screen. I actually want to show it like this. I can quickly override that. I do have the ability as well to manipulate this data. So one thing that I've done in a number of cases is here we've got actual numerical values coming into Klipfolio. Let's imagine that, I'm not interested in these exact raw values. I want to apply a little bit of logic to this raw data to be able to consume it in a slightly better way. I'm going to do something that's a little bit similar to what I often do in Salesforce as well, that they call bucketing. I'm going to take this data that are just raw numbers, and I'm going to apply what we call a function to it. You've got access to a huge library of functions in Klipfolio that allow you to do really simple things like sum a column of data, all the way up to quite advanced statistical functions. If you can conceive or think of a way to manipulate data or a requirement, it's likely that we can help you achieve it. These are very similar to what you'd see in Excel, not an exact mirror, but a lot of similarity. So I'm going to apply a simple function here called ceiling. That is a pretty easy way to take numerical data like this and bucket it into categories. So I'm going to say ceiling of 50, which means it's going to take every number and round it up to the closest 50. So 12 becomes 50, 144 becomes 150, and this has allowed me to take this column of raw data and change it into a more usable dimension or segment with which I can slice my data. So I'm going to call this clip buckets, and I'm actually going to add a new column of data, and I'm just going to get the original raw data back. So here I've got my bucketed version of clips, and here I've just got the raw data. I don't need to do much in this modeler, in the modeling data workflow, but I do have the ability to do some really cool things if my use case requires that I manipulate the data a little bit to consume it in a better way. So let's save this as is. And we have now modeled this data. I didn't do a good job of giving it a clear name, like I mentioned was important earlier. Let's call this perfect. So we talked about two distinct ways of getting data into Klipfolio from Salesforce. Each has its own pros and cons, but both are very, very easy. I tend to prefer the reports option because I'm really fast and quick at creating reports in Salesforce, and I have an army of reports that I use all the time. That tends to be my preferred option. Our co-founder, Alan Villa, also a big Salesforce user. He and I debate often. He much prefers the SQL route, largely because you don't ever have to leave Klipfolio. You sort of decide that you want a different piece of data, you can just go and fetch it. You don't have to go create that report anywhere else. We're happy to clarify when you might use either option, and we're happy to help whichever approach you take. So now we've got some good data. Let's see how we can bring this data to life. So with our data source, I'm going to create a new clip in Klipfolio. Now this screen here, I'll leave the help open because I find the help sidebar is very, very useful. Not necessarily this particular article, but maybe we'll close it in fact. You can always get the help back by clicking any of these question marks that you see throughout the platform. This screen is a really important one and a lot going on. I'll walk you through a few key sections of it. So over here on the right, we have what we call the components palette. This shows all of the different chart types that you have access to in Klipfolio. So if we want to work with a, let's work with a table actually. If we want to work with a table type of chart, we just grab whatever we need, pull it into our work area in the middle. Another really important part of this screen is over at the top left. We call this the component tree. I often refer to it as a table of contents. It shows us all of the different elements of the current clip that you're building. So a table has these 4 different columns. The component tree is a really good way to navigate through the clip as you're building it. So let's do some really simple things here. In our first column, we're going to put our team members' names, and let's grab the lead scores and the total number of clips. So I've got a huge amount of data in this table. In fact, I think I've got, I forget how many total number of records there were, but maybe around 2,500 rows. Almost impossible to consume. I can try to do some simple things here. So I could, these are our total lead scores. So I could sort this highest to lowest, get the highest lead scores at the top. And I might want to do this I might want to have a report, a clip like this that I look at, daily or weekly to make sure that our team is engaged with the highest value prospects. I could also sort by a different column, which would override my first selection. Now we're sorting it by the prospects who have the largest number of clips. Probably, this data is still very difficult to interpret at a glance. I've got 3,000 rows in this table. What I might want to do is pare it down a little bit. So obviously we've got all of these duplicate values in the first column. If we're not interested in being able to see the individual records, we just want to see the aggregate data, we can group everything together. So now I've removed all the duplicates, and because I've grouped the data in this first column, the data in the second column and third column, the numerical values automatically get aggregated. So I can see the total lead score in Pilar's category, the total lead score in Elvira's category, and so on. Whenever you, so let's do a few things. I did that fairly quickly. The way I removed the duplicates was I right-clicked on the column itself, and I had the option to group. What I can also do, and actually what I do more often, is I navigate through the clip through this components tree, and I call it the table of contents, over on the left. So when I right-click on an individual column, I see those simple options to manipulate the data. And when I remove the duplicates on one column, this is text, whenever I do that on a text column, if we look into one of the numerical values, numerical data will be aggregated by default with sum. But in this case, I actually don't think sum is the best way to do it. I would either want to look at average or median. What is the average lead score of individuals in everyone's territory? And so now that tells an entirely different story. It seems those in one territory are performing slightly better than those in another. And there's really one territory that stands out as doing a really great job. It looks like I've got some blank records for some. So I might do some further cleanup. So if I right click on one of the columns, another of the options I see is the ability to filter. Filtering is a really simple way to clean up the data. I might decide that I'm not interested or I don't need to have certain team members in this chart, and I can exclude them. I also want to exclude the column header. That's the only thing I'm going to do here, actually. And by doing this, Any new data that appears in this report tomorrow or the next day is automatically going to be included. So if my name appears in this list tomorrow, because I've only said to exclude one item, anything new automatically gets included. So that's the right approach to take. So we've cleaned up this clip a little bit. Let's look at and any questions coming to mind. Happy to help out. Let's look at things a slightly different way. Let's bring in a bar chart. So even though initially we had decided we wanted to build a table, I still have this list of components on the right. I can drag anything into the chart and bring that data to life however I see fit. So in our chart, let's look at putting dates on the x-axis. So I'm going to put all these dates down on our axis, and let's see if we can notice anything at a glance. Okay, so it looks like the dates are in order by default. That looks pretty good. However, and one nice thing you can do when you're building content like this, when you're building a clip, is this small button over here, the lightning bolt button, or there's a keyboard shortcut, Alt-A or Option-A on a Mac, lets you do what we call evaluate the data. So I can see a few things here. Firstly, I'm always interested in how many records I'm working with. And I also want to see how many or what the data looks like. So what's jumping out to me here is that I've got duplicates, 2 records for the 18th of April, 4 for the 19th, and so on, back in 2017. So right away, that's a clue for me that I want to remove these duplicate values. So I'm going to group this data together, and we see the chart react slightly. I also probably want to create a filter. So let's look for our column header. Okay, let's try one more time. Okay. It looks like because I've modeled this data, then the column header is by default not included, so that's positive. And we've already done most of the hard work. So I've grouped this data by day. On our series, I might just want to show the total number of clips that our prospects created on every day. And you can see that that data comes to life on the chart. At a glance, not overly compelling. I don't know how I'm going to take action on this data. I see that I'm a little bit concerned. Looks like my data set might only go up to 2018. Curious, maybe I will look into that shortly. But, and I do see a decline in some of the recent performance, so that's a little bit troubling. But overall, it's sort of tough to spot trends. There's too much on this chart. So what I can do is on the x-axis, another great tip is that every element of your clip, be it one of the columns in your table or the x-axis on your chart, every single section of the clip has its own properties menu. And the properties panel lets us control tons of different visual options. So for instance, I might decide that this data is a lot more readable if I put these labels on an angle. I could also include a title and so on. What I wanted to do here was, right now the data is coming in the format month, day, year. Let's say we weren't interested in the day. We just wanted to show the month. We can change the data format right in the properties panel. And because this data is grouped, now all of a sudden we're grouping it by just the month and year. So I have April, May, June 2017, all the way up to the current month. Now all of a sudden I can interpret this data so much more easily. I can easily spot trends, and now I'm positive that I'm concerned something is going on. Dangerous downward trend. I can spot maybe some potential seasonality coming up for us in June 2019, or maybe I know offhand that something happened last year and I don't need to be concerned. So this data can be consumed in so much better ways. One thing I might do to clean up this chart is over on the series, show the actual value so users can interpret it a little bit better. And I might want to give this series a better name so that it shows up in the legend. I'll show you one other really nice little trick. We've got all these different chart types. The layout grid is a really nice approach you can take to sort of design and lay out your chart in a way that makes the most sense for your users. So let's keep those as they are. However, let's pull in a different component, maybe a value pair over here. A value pair is a really nice way to showcase two related values, maybe the number of calls today versus yesterday, or it's a nice way to show a value that you're interested in. So let's just take the total number of clips. So I'm just going to choose this entire column of data. And you can see what we get is the actual raw values. What I'm more interested in is the total summary. So 57,000. If I'm showing this number on a wall border, even just to make it more easily interpreted, I can do some simple math in the formula. So let's divide it by 1,000, and let's say we only want one decimal place, and let's put a suffix 1,000. We often do this on our wall board, so we can make the numbers really large and just easy to read. A lot more easier than showing a lot of decimal places or a lot of digits. Especially for revenue, the actual dollar doesn't really matter. We can sacrifice a few digits if we gain a lot of clarity. And then some context here. Let's change the font there too. And what this is number of clips. So I can easily add some text. I just need to put it inside quotation marks. Let's do one last thing here. Let's center it. So it took us a few minutes to get this looking in the way we want. But now that we've done it, over in the component tree, our table of contents, I can right click and copy this value pair that we've built. Paste that exact work over here on the right. And the only really things I want to change are, instead of number of clips, let's this time look at the lead score. Let's maybe not, yeah, okay, that's all we wanted, lead score. Let's change our suffix. Maybe we'll keep the suffix. We also want to divide by 1,000. Here we go, and this text is lead score instead of number of clips. So nice, easy way to, the layout grid is great where you want to present the data in a very, very specific way, and you can't necessarily achieve that just in a single chart. You need to show a number of different chart types side by side. I will show one last thing. Really cool, really simple functionality that just helps call out something that's especially good or especially bad. Indicators. Indicators let you specify really simple logic in Klipfolio to display a visual indicator when the condition is met. So we're going to say if the lead score is greater than 400, let's display an icon. Let's display a star. And you don't want to overuse indicators, otherwise your chart becomes too colorful. And really the only things we want to call out are when something is very, very good and we want to celebrate it, or when something is glaringly wrong and you need to take action right away. If there's too much color, the user just doesn't know where to look and what's important. So we have built a little bit of content here with data coming from Salesforce. Let's give this a good name. This is number of clips, will be good for now, and let's save this. Any questions at all, let me know, and I'm happy to dig deeper. I'm going to share this with all of our users. Now, we're at a really, really exciting time in Klipfolio. Let's just add that clip that we built. Perfect. So we're at a really exciting time in Klipfolio. We launched in 2011, and what I've just shown has always been our core platform. 100% of our customers are leveraging this particular solution today. We've always won on huge power and huge flexibility at a very, very aggressive price point. But we're at a really interesting time because we're currently in beta with a really cool and extremely powerful extension to our platform. Even the naming is about to change. Power metrics. So if we think of the classic platform and what I've just shown as hugely powerful, hugely flexible, but as having a little bit of complexity to it and a learning curve that users have to overcome. And you can sort of see that in how I created this content. The final output of our work is very nice, very polished, and we were able to show the data in the exact way that we wanted, down to the decimal place. However, there was some work required to get there. What we're trying to achieve with Power Metrics is eliminate a lot of those barriers. And let me go back to the conversation and the points around raw data. In the classic platform, even if we go through the step of modeling the data, which we did, we really sort of keep it in its raw format. What we try to do with Power Metrics is we ask the user to explain a little bit more about the data. What is the date column that you want to work with? What is the one metric that you want to measure? Is it revenue, number of units, etc.? And by virtue of the user walking us through and getting a little bit of a better understanding of the data, we can actually do the building for you. So let's take a quick look at that, and let's also use the data that we brought in from Salesforce. So I'm going to create a new metric. We do have some pre-built metrics, so if you have data coming in from any of these services, and we're adding new ones all the time, you can get started pretty quickly. Today we are going to define our own. So the first thing I'll do is use a data source that I've created already. So here I think this is the one we just created today, model, leads, and clips. So that's the data that I want to work with. We'll go to the next step. What is the one element of the data that I want to measure? Let's choose number of clips, and let's choose to sum that data. I actually see I've made one mistake in the data. I'm going to go fix that. What I'm able to do on this screen here is choose, and the mistake I made was not converting some of these to text data. I'm able to choose what elements in my data do I want to be able to slice and dice by. So things like, and segment and dimension. Things like the account manager on our team, being able to look at our metric, which in this case is number of clips, but that's really just to do a public demo. I mean, this would normally be number of calls or number of amount of revenue, amount of new wins, more meaningful metrics. How do I want to be able to dig deeper into those? So let's go modify our data slightly to be able to do a better job of that. These clip buckets, let's just make this text. That's going to allow us to do a little bit more, and that should be enough. So now we're going to have two elements by which we can segment our data. So let's save this. Here we go. And now we can choose clip buckets. So let's go to our next step. What is our date column? Now, a power metric does require a date. However, your data does not need to have dates in it. So our data does. So I'm going to choose demo call. And that's going to let us show this in a meaningful way all the way back to 2017, how many calls have happened over time. If I had geography in this data set, I could show where the calls were occurring, things like that. If your data does not have a date, you have the ability to use the current date and time. So today, it would just show me the total number of clips in our data set. As this data source refreshed, whether it was every minute, every hour, or every day, tomorrow I would have a new data point, or an hour from now I would have a new data point. And this data would continue, and this trend would continue to grow over time. So another of the huge core values of what we're doing with Power Metrics in beta and it will be there in production as well, we're currently in beta, is we are remembering historical data. That's another value prop that I should have mentioned around why Klipfolio and Salesforce together. The Salesforce data is ephemeral. It's constantly overwritten unless certain elements are structured to be stored internally in Salesforce. But things like when I look at the revenue of an account, that is today's data. If the revenue changes tomorrow, that data is going to look different tomorrow. What we're doing in Klipfolio is snapshotting and storing that data over time. So we're going to help you track and monitor these metrics as they grow and as they change over time, even if the source data changes. Our customer base is extremely excited about this. So we're going to use the date field that I've got in our data source. Let's move to the next step. Let's give it a good name. We'll just keep it like this. More clips is better, but if this was something like bounce rate, then I would change it to a lower bounce rate is better. So whether it's up is positive or up is negative. And let's save this. And we have just created what we call a power metric, number of clips. So from a very high level view, here's the summary look. So this is the number of clips over the last 30 days, trending down about 10% from the previous period. But let's dig into it and see what we have access to. So without any building, we've brought this data to life and can look at it in a number of different ways. The segment, firstly, the date range that our data source supports is all in here. So I can look at the number of clips over the last little while. And I also have the ability to segment. So not just what the total was, but who is working with these prospects. What I actually want to do, and I find a more impactful way to showcase this, is let's segment it by none and look at it as a line. I want to take this data and I want to be able to consume it in a slightly more flexible way. So first, I'm actually going to star the power metric, which puts it right at the top of my list over on the left. And next, I'm going to add it to a metric board. I can also add this to any of the other dashboards that I've already built, but let's put it on a metric board and let's call this number of clips. So all of those dimensions that we said we wanted to work with when we were initially building the power metric are visible here, and I can add all of those. And all of those then become global filters right up at the top. So let's see, that I can leverage. So if I know that I'm really only interested in looking at one specific rep's performance, I have those filters right at my fingertips. What I can also do, and what we're going to do here, is this is all going to be one single metric. It doesn't have to be. I have created a number of different metrics in this trial account, but this one is just one. And I might decide that, while yes, looking at the total is relevant, but I also want to consume this in a slightly different way. So let's see. So I'm just going to add this same power metric a number of different times. And I'm going to quickly just showcase it in a slightly different way. Firstly, I am interested in this, just a quick visual breakdown of which team members are working with the prospect base. I'm going to clean up this data slightly by removing a few. I'm going to exclude these individuals. And I get a visual indication that they've been excluded. I'm also going to just give this only as much space as it needs, because screen real estate is very, very important. And actually, with that in mind, what I was going to say is you want to put your most important figure right at the top left, because that's where people's eyes gravitate to immediately. So let's just put our overall figure right up here. So that's the first thing our users see. And further to that, let's configure this slightly. Let's add a comparison period. So I can at a glance see how the team is trending. And let's do one more thing here. Let's take this last chart and we might want to segment it by our clip buckets. So now I can see what our more engaged prospects are doing versus some of the less engaged prospects. And I'm thinking about this in terms of how much content they're creating, which for us is a very, very powerful indicator of potential success. So here we've got a metric board. We were able to put it together very, very quickly. And actually, by putting it together, we really mean we made the decision on how to showcase that data. The actual building, very, very quick. And so, you know, the message I would want to impart today is, you know, firstly, we're in beta with Power Metrics, and we're really, really excited about it. We want to help users consume and interpret the data that's relevant to them more quickly and in an easier way. So you and I have built this today. We can save this. When we share this out with other team members, we have made some key choices available to them. So while I might be interested in looking always at the last 12 months and looking at all team members, maybe Garfield is always going to filter this so it's only showing data for him. I have overridden that filter in the pie chart, so it's still showing data for everyone, but everything else adjusted to only show data for Garfield. And maybe he is only interested in these top performing prospects. Anyone has the ability to consume this data and apply the filters in a way that's most meaningful and most relevant to them. And hopefully users find, and the early feedback is indicating that they can achieve this much more quickly through a Power Metric than they previously were doing on a dashboard. We love hearing that. Great early feedback. We've been experimenting internally for over a year. We love it. And there really is a use case, you know, common use cases for both. There are classic dashboards that I've built that I love the flexibility of, and I love how I've been able to sort of showcase the data exactly the way I wanted. A scoreboard, a leaderboard is a really good example of that. We launched, let me just find this web page here. We launched a small contest close to 2 years ago, and this is a doctored version of that dashboard. We've just sort of put some more recognizable faces on it, let's say. But this is exactly what our team was using internally. So we've got some key revenue categories, or key categories rather, that every team member is measured on. We have each team member's picture, and the color is very meaningful. It turns red, green, orange based on actual performance. The team loved this. So we've used it ever since. We updated the data to, instead of looking at the contest data from 2 years ago, just be live monthly. So every team member can see this, and you know, salespeople, we can't help it. We're competitive. One team member of mine constantly has this on his second monitor up during the day. So I love the flexibility and the ability to build a dashboard exactly like this. You can even include GIFs instead of pictures. However, speed of execution and flexibility of consumption is a really positive story around Power Metrics. I've chosen to put this on a dashboard, but really the only thing that we created, let's go back to our home screen. The only thing that we created was this individual Power Metric. If I take this and share it out with key team members, then they can take this and they can slice and dice and really dictate how they consume it instead of me dictating it. Any questions or concerns? I'm happy to dig deeper on anything we covered here. In the interest of time, I'm going to wrap up shortly. I want to spend just a few moments talking about Klipfolio's licensing. Again, if you're working in a trial, it is a free trial, no cost, no commitment. It's 2 weeks by default, but let us know if you need more time. Also, no credit card required. If you do see potential in working with us longer term, let's talk about our licensing. Largely based on three factors. One, the number of users who are involved on your team, and these could be users either consuming the data, view only, or creating content. We don't differentiate between the two. The second factor is the really the amount of content you are creating. So this metric board that we created just a few moments ago, this is what we would call a dashboard. And any of the dashboard that we were looking at before that, and this one as well, this is also what we would consider a dashboard. So that's a large factor in our pricing, basically the amount of dashboards you are creating. So on our entry-level plan, starting at $29 a month, you can build 3 dashboards. On our Grow plan, around $100 a month, you can build up to 20. The final, really the biggest factor in our licensing is the frequency of the data sources refreshing. So again, if we think about that story, what are we building our sales dashboard for, or our revenue dashboard for? Is it for our executive team who are really only looking at the data, at the end of the day, in which case it doesn't need to be live and up to the minute? Or is this on our sales floor where even a 15-minute delay is okay, but the data can't be any more out of date than that. That's the last factor, the last largest factor in the licensing. We do have the ability to refresh data as quickly as every minute on some of the higher tier plans. Some of the other smaller factors include the ability to update your logo, which can be done really easily, drag and drop or upload a file. That's unlocked at the Grow plan. The ability to consume some of the content that we've built by publishing a URL to it is a factor in our pricing. And actually a more common one, the ability to download and share the data offline. Scheduled emails are a really simple feature. I've got a number of reports that get delivered to me every Monday or some every day, just calling out key pieces of content. So I built that dashboard or a team member built that dashboard. They can quickly schedule that report to be sent out to any other user at whatever interval is relevant. One of the ways that Klipfolio differentiates is by providing world-class support. So anyone in trial and all of our customers have access to work with our incredible support team by email or by live chat. We do live chat. I don't see it in my trial because I've disabled it, but you will see it in your trial, and you can also find it on our website. We do live chat 20 hours a day, 5 days per week. Technical live chat is something that our customers have access to as an optional add-on. But take me up on the offer. We aim to provide world-class support. So if you see potential, please engage our team. Chat with us is a great way to start a conversation, and we would love the opportunity to learn about your use case and see if we're the right fit. We're a subscription platform, and we sell very ethically. We're not interested at all, and it's of no benefit to us to win a customer today if we oversold or misled that customer in any way, because we're going to lose them next month. So please take us up on the offer. Let us know what brought you to us, what you're trying to achieve, and we'll do our best to help out. I will stay on the line for a few more moments if there's any questions or comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I'll also send you a cleaned up version of the recording. Thank you so much and have a fantastic rest of the day. Bye for now.